Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to Monday. Beautiful Brice Day. Happy Monday, everybody. I hope you've had a fantastic weekend. And welcome to Aquarius Rising Africa, where the weather is warming up. I have doves outside. I have cats on my couch. I'm happy. Beautiful day. So welcome to Monday. And I'm so looking forward to having Brice, Henry IV of France, the missing head.
The missing head. I'm loving this series, you guys. Like
all these missing heads. I mean, what the F?
When you think you might be a little bit weird or you might not be doing that great in life, like at least your family is not stealing bodies. Like, you know, you just kind of have to do a little bit of a reflection. Like, at least you're not finding body parts in grandpa's attic from some long lost historical figure. And we love our pettiness. And that's one thing I said last week. Like these stories, some of these stories we're going to talk about happened so long ago that it is actually kind of comical to look back and just compare. And this story with Henry IV or Henri, however they say it in France, Henri IV.
Henri. And you gotta go through the nose. Henri.
I think French is a beautiful language. I got some French in my heritage, but Lord have mercy, it is one of the hard. You don't even say half the freaking word in France. In French, you just say like the first part, and you just kind of
go.
So yeah,
I've got strong French in my bloodline, and it's funny. My name is French, but and my grandmother, who's my bloodline, that's French as well. So it's quite crazy, but no speaking French whatsoever. But I've got my main bloodlines from my mother's side are German, French, and Scottish.
I'm pretty much same. I've got a lot of so Brice with an I is actually Brice. It's my mother's. That's her maiden name, and they were Huguenots, as we say down here in the South. Huguenots.
The French Huguenots.
In the South we say Huguenots. There's still a Huguenot church in Charleston, South Carolina, because which we are going to talk about, that actually plays huge into the story with Henri. And you know, when this how they tell us we were settled here, whatever if that's true or not, that the French people that did not want to be Catholic, but with the war of religion in France, came to what was then Charlestown, which is now Charleston, because Charlestown at that time was an English settlement, and they had a wall around the town where they wouldn't let Catholics in. So there was a lot of French. If you go to Charleston, South Carolina today, you're going to find a lot of people with French last names. My mother speaks pretty good French. My aunt is really good at it. There's a tiny French quarter in Charleston as well, because they were escaping. And so, you know, for anybody who is from this side of the United States, who is in a predominantly English settlement, obviously Watson, my last name is English. That's my grandfather's line. This might resonate more with you, because these wars of religions were vicious. And so people were fleeing for their lives. And right in the center of this whole drama with my Jesus is better than your Jesus, is Henri IV and our favorite queen of all time, Catherine de Medici, which we have spoken about before. If you guys remember, that's a fun one. She was quite an interesting lady who, she was, used Nostradamus as her person. She was called the Serpent Queen. We're going to get more into her relationship with Henry's mother, which is in some letters that were written, which were quite telling. She was the one that also put cow poo in her hoo-ha in order to make babies. That's the one. Y'all remember? So she's going to play a starring role in this as well. Our favorite lady. You know, like, Lord have mercy. Like, at least we're not, ladies, don't do that. That is disgusting. Do not do that.
You don't want to do that. Trust me.
Obviously it worked. Once she started having babies with her husband, like they had a lot, which we're going to get into, because karmically, like looking at how many sons she actually had with her husband, who was the king of France at the time from the Valois family, the amount of sons they have, you would rest assured that the line would continue. But all of her sons died out, and that's when Henry, who was their cousin, came to the throne and started the Bourbon line, which is the really famous line of the Louis XIV, Marie Antoinette. So he's the start. They're cousins, though. It's all the same family, y'all. It's all the same family. We're going to get into how they're cousins. So this is the switch. Henri is the switch from the Valois line to the Bourbon line, okay? Now, we're going to get into his first wife as well, which was Margaret of Valois, who was Catherine's daughter. Which was Henry's cousin. Obviously, they married each other, and she was very fascinating. She had some really, really crazy claims that she made about her mother at that time. That's her. That's the daughter that married Henry, which at that time were thought to be pretty crazy. But now we know they're probably legit. Like her mother used to make her and her brothers have sex with each other while she watched. And she made these claims.
That's such SRA stuff, though. That is so SRA.
So back because in that time
that's
period,
common in SRA.
Yes, I know. We know that. But back in that time period and subsequently into our more modern history, as we study this, people have seen her as being a little crazy. But they knew that Catherine was eccentric, but they didn't realize. But now I feel like Margaret of Valois is getting some I hope she feels, even though she's long dead, I hope she feels validated. Like we're now validating her. Like we believe you. We believe you. She hated her mother. And that's going to kind of get into the debacle that happened between, because you guys remember Catherine de Medici, she was not royal blood. If you guys remember, she was from a huge banking family. Does that ring any bells? A banking family in Italy. And she was used as a pawn and married into the French royal family, which is what we see with the Rothschilds, with the English royal family. They're all the same family, though. We always differentiate between countries. They're all cousins of each other, right? So we see these banking families marrying into the royal bloodline. And so Catherine, even though she was born somewhat nobility, she was not royal blood. And so, in the hierarchy, which we know hierarchy is the negative side, but in the hierarchy, a woman born of royal blood is always going to trump someone who is not. And this is the issue we're going to see with Henry's mother and Catherine. All right, so let's get it. This is juicy, y'all. Like days of our lives. All these problems got nothing on. I'm telling you guys, if you want some petty, interesting stories, just start reading history, because this is what happens when people don't have TV. No, I'm just kidding. When they don't have YouTube, they create all these juicy stories that, idle hands are the devil's playtime, right? So let's get into this. So Henry IV of France, he was born on the 13th of December, 1553. He died on the 14th of May, 1610, which we're going to get into. He was assassinated. We're going to get into that. He is known as Good King Henry and Henry the Great. Now, I actually quite like this guy. I have not seen anything about Henry that would raise speculation. I know they all get abused and stuff, but there's a lot about Henry that I actually really, really like. And I know that there was a production company over in France when I was originally doing research that made a big motion picture about him and all that we're going to talk about today. And it looked fabulous. Like just the editing, it just looked fabulous, exciting. However, it's in French. So I don't want to read subtitles all night. So
listen, these French are really dodgy, because if you're also looking back, I'm just sitting here thinking, when we were doing the Cabbage Patch Kids and stuff like that, those original postcards are all in French.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. So it makes me wonder exactly how dodgy these French were. Yeah, no, the French were nasty.
The international language, at least at one point, it was considered the international language.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like in the Olympics, at least, and I remember learning that in 1996, because that's when the Olympics were in Atlanta, and I remember asking my parents why they were speaking in French first, and my parents were like, well, it's the international language. And that's when I was like, oh, so that's why I think some things. So it's interesting though, right? Because it's not the most widely spoken. Mandarin is the most widely spoken language, right? Like it's not.
But that's only because of the Chinese are so much bigger. But the most internationally accepted language is English, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
But Mandarin
Now,
is,
yeah, and like I said, I mean, we had to take French. I think a lot of people that's one of the languages you kind of have to take. It's a Latin-based language. But anyway, that's why I wish. So listen, if you guys want to, like they did for Mata Hari, if the French company is listening to us, you want to overdub those actors with English, I would be glad to watch it. Otherwise, I'm gonna be really confused. So anyway, so now this is interesting about France, as we say down here, France at this time, is that there was this area called Navarre. And this area is actually located in the northern part of Spain, close to the Pyrenees Mountains. Now, I've been in the Pyrenees Mountains. I love the Pyrenees Mountains. It's a very magical place where their language there is both Spanish and French. They kind of have their own. It's where the Basque people are, which is the highest RH negatives, like Shanti and me. Maybe that's where we hail from. Shanti is the Pyrenees. It's very magical, right? There's a very, so this area of Navarre, it's kind of in northern Spain, right over what we would see as Spain today. But at this time, it was a little like its own little area country that was associated with France. So one historian said you can kind of think about this. France at this time almost had two courts, both equally ruled by this family of France. And so Henry was born in Navarre. His mother was the Queen of Navarre. So he became, when his mother passed away, which we're going to get into because Catherine had a hand to play in his mother's death. So he became King of Navarre in 1572 when his mother died. And then he became King of France in 1589. And just like in the English side, when James, the Stuart king, after Elizabeth I died, became King of England too, it connected Scotland and England. So this is his taking over the royal court in France kind of connected Navarre, and then eventually it became part of Spain. There's a lot of bourbon still in Spain. In fact, they've requested DNA from some of the Spanish bourbons to be able to verify the missing head, which we'll get into. So the bourbons are both in France and in Spain. Okay, so again, he's the first for the House of Bourbon, as we said. So when it came to him taking the throne, the House of Valois had ruled for 260 years when this all happened. So they had been on the throne for a very long time, and tensions were high with the war of religions. And we see this also with Catherine de' Medici with her grab for power when her husband died through her children, ruling through her sons, right? Henry's mother was the Queen of Navarre. Her name was Jeanne, I think is how you say it. Jeanne. Jean. What's her name? Jean. You guys, don't. You French people don't say the word.
That's for the female spelling, though. Is that a female, Jean?
Yes, female. It's his mother. So she was the Queen of Navarre. So they were putting, just like we see in history, there are at this time we are seeing some females take the reign. Right, we are seeing some females, especially we're coming off of Isabel and Ferdinand in Spain, and that where they both equally ruled. So she was the queen. Let me find my place here. All right, so her name was in 1555. So 1555. 2 years after Henry's birth, she ascended the throne upon the death of her father. So I'm going to try to explain to you guys this family tree so that I like in my head when I'm trying to figure out what's going on, I really want to understand who everybody is in relationship to everybody else. Now, there are a lot of Henrys we know from the past. They weren't very creative. Everyone had like the same fucking name. So I apologize for this. So yes. So Jean, who is Jean? Jean, Henry's mama, his mama. She was the sister, or is in this time the sister of Francis I of France. So she is the sister to the main monarch. So that's a lot of power that she holds. Not only was her father the king before him, but she is now the direct sister of the main king. So she has a lot of favor with him. They had, as siblings, actually, from what I read about I really kind of like their relationship. They had a really close sibling bond. It didn't seem creepy in any way. He was very supportive of her. He thought she was very smart. He thought his sister was very smart, that she had a lot of good ideas politically, which of course is very much going to come into play with how Catherine now sees Jean. So she's the sister of Francis I of France. Now, Francis I is the father of another Henry II, who married Catherine de' Medici. So Jean is Henry II's aunt. That's his aunt, okay? So Henri of Navarre and Henry II, I'll try to make them sound a little different, are first cousins. Okay, they're first cousins. So now, if you guys remember from the past, our past talk about Catherine was never, and Henry II were never supposed to be on the throne. You guys know Mary, Queen of Scots, Mary Stuart. She was sent to live in Catherine's court, and she married her oldest son, who then died, or his oldest son, right? So this is all happening, right? So anyway, just so you guys know, this is kind of the tension within the family drama, right? So Henry and Catherine's children were second cousins so at least Margaret of Valois was not his first cousin, but it said there's a little bit more of a DNA difference. All right, so Henry of Navarre, as his mother were baptized Catholic. So this is where it's going to get really important and where this kind of starts a lot of the tension and will lead to his assassination later on. So France, I believe, is still predominantly a Catholic country. There's been a very strong Catholic hold in France. Catherine de' Medici herself, because the Medicis were also popes, these bankers were also popes, her uncles were popes. That was the bargaining chip by giving Catherine to the Valois family, because the Pope, in a lot of ways, holds more power economically, militaristically than the royal families do. And so by bargaining Catherine to the House of Valois, France now has the backing of the Vatican. Right? So this has nothing to do with God. This has fuck all to do with your faith, right? This is all about power grabs. So that was Catherine's value to the Valois. And of course, the Vatican holding on to France is huge benefit to the Vatican. So I hope you guys kind of see how this all is going. So the fact that Jean and Henri, so we have this, this Protestant Reformation that's popping up. We have all John Calvin, Martin Luther, all these people that are starting to learn how to read the Bible and go, wait a minute, it's just not adding up. We've been lied to, right? Like they're trying to, so we have all these Protestant Reformations popping up. So Jean, Henri's mother, takes a liking to Calvinism, to John Calvin. So she starts to put her backing into, as we say in the South, the Huguenots, the French Protestants, basically, the Calvins. She starts to back them. Even though they're raised, she and her son were baptized Catholic, they're fully Calvinistic at this time. Now, again, this is not a problem because of faith. This is a problem because of military ties, because of power. She is going against the arrangement, the alliance with the Vatican. And that is terrifying, I'm sure, for any royal family to all of a sudden have that turned against you. But nonetheless, they're down in Navarre. So at this point, it's not that big of a deal because they're down in Navarre. They're not a part of the big France. They are, but they're not at the same time, So, and at this point, Henry II and Catherine de' Medici have like 4 sons, multiple daughters. It seems, like I said, it seems pretty obvious that, as I would think too, their line's going to continue. Like the Valois line's going to continue. They've got all these sons. They don't have an heir to spare. They have an heir, a spare, and a spare, right? So whatever, right? So he was raised again a Huguenot. Henry would go on to support the Huguenots in the War of Religion that broke out in 1562. And he actually fought a lot with the Huguenots. So now let's kind of get into so Henry II died on July 10th, 1559 at only 40 years old. He died as a result from a jousting accident, which this happens. Like, why are you jousting? Like, this has happened a lot. This happened to King Henry VIII. They're basically running at each other with spears to have fun, right? That sounds kind of like You know, this kind of sounds like a satanic ritual to me, like it's jousting. I don't know. I can think of kickball is way more fun. Dodgeball, as awful as dodgeball was when we were kids and getting smacked in the face with the ball, that's way more fun than jousting. So anyway, he dies. He had all these mistresses. He was not interested in Catherine. Listen, if you're gonna put cow shit in your hoo-ha, I don't think a man's gonna be very interested in you anyway. You did what you had to do to have the heirs. But and we know when Henry was alive, Henry II was alive, he also had a lot of respect for his aunt, Jeanne. He took a lot of her advice politically, his aunt, and he also had mistresses that had more power really at the court than Catherine did, even though she was the queen. So when he dies, this is Catherine's opportunity to seize power, because her sons, a lot of her sons are still kind of under her I don't know what you would call, they call she kind of, I forgot, there's a word for it. When the kid's not old enough to take the throne, they have like someone that helps that's responsible for ruling there's a word for it. Now my mind's gone, a regent or something. I think regent or something like that is what, so she's acting really as the ruler of France through her sons at this point. You know, and she makes a big scene of this after her husband dies, even though there was like no love in this relationship. She continually wears black from here on out to mourn his death. Meanwhile, I think his death was probably one of the most exciting things to ever happen to her, because now she has total control and now she can kick all the mistresses out, right? So at this point,
finally,
all that witchcraft paid off.
Finally, the beggar is dead.
At only 42, like, girl was like sitting there going like, I got my whole life and I'm only halfway. And that's one thing too, guys. I want to point this out. A historian pointed this out, and I think this is important to say. And I was like, whoa, he's right. I didn't even think about that. A lot of times we look back at these historical times and we think people died young, because they'll say like the average lifespan was like 50. That's not true. The average lifespan back in this time was like 50, because so many babies died young, so it brought the average down. If you made it past 5 years old, you were probably going to live, and you didn't die in battle or something or get poisoned by these people, you probably were going to live to like 60, 70, like we are today. Like, so at 40, because they were around the same age, at 40 when he died, she still had half of her life to go. She was like, yes, like this is like girl boss, like I'm in charge, move over. And so this is where now Queen Jeanne of Navarre never liked Catherine, never liked her. She was the one that called her the Serpent Queen. There are letters that we still have today of Jeanne's concern, Queen Jeanne of Navarre's concern about all the rumors that Catherine ate babies.
Well, it would not surprise me.
Exactly.
Let's face facts. I mean, 10 years ago or even 5 years ago, if someone had told me the story, I was like, I don't think so.
Right.
Like, really? That's propaganda.
Exactly.
But now that we know what we know, I think it's makes sense, because all these elites were pedos and cannibals, right?
Yep. And there's many letters where she references this. And it's funny to me that throughout history, people have questioned her daughter, thinking her daughter must be a little bit crazy to be telling these stories about Catherine making Margaret of Valois and her brothers have sex. But no one ever questioned Jeanne's concern, because she was a very stable ruler. And I think history has seen her daughter as more of like a loose cannon, this princess of Valois, but whereas Jeanne was a ruler and she was very respected. And for her to have these concerns over these rumors in multiple letters, no one ever questioned that. But now looking back, it's like, that's not shocking. That's not shocking. And who knows? She in her pettiest, though, this is my favorite. Jeanne of Navarre, this is the pettiest thing she said, and I love it. That Florentine grocer's daughter. I was like, "Ooh, she petty."
I'm gonna close.
Florentine grocer's daughter. Like, there's nothing wrong with being a grocer's daughter, but that is a condemnation from the royal family. Like, she's
totally
like trash. Like, we are royal family.
You minion. You absolute minion.
And not to mention that Catherine de Medici came into the royal family with more money than they had because they were bankers, but then she was a grocer's. I laughed so hard. I was like, petty is as petty does. Like, humans don't change, do we? All right. So despite all their issues, Henry II, again, so the deceased king, Catherine's husband, who really loved his aunt Jeanne, he had no he had arranged already for Margaret, his daughter of Valois, the princess, to marry Henri IV of Navarre. So that would make Margaret the Queen of Navarre. And Jeanne was okay with this when Henry was alive. But once Henry died, she got more concerned because now she's dealing with Catherine. But on April 11th, 1572, they did decide to go forward with the arranged marriage of Henri and Margaret. Now, this will be his first wife. And I actually really do like their relationship. They seem to be really good friends. And if you get into, which maybe later we can get into more of Margaret's story, there comes a time where Margaret is such a whistleblower, as we would call her today, about her mother, that Catherine actually cuts her off and doesn't send her money. But Henri, her cousin, Henry IV, actually did make sure she was okay and like really protected her. And she protected him. We're going to get into that. He was almost assassinated and she was the one who protected him. So Margaret and Henry did have a very good, they were never in love with each other. Like when they ended up divorcing, it wasn't that big of a scandal because they never were, it just seemed like they had a really solid like cousinship, I would say. Like, you know, with my cousins today, like I don't obviously want to marry them. That's gross, but I would protect my cousins, you know, like there seemed to be a good camaraderie. They both she hated her mom. His mom hated her mom, you know, like there was all this stuff going. So anyway, I just wanted to put that into perspective. So in order for Henri and Margaret to get married, they needed to come up to Paris from Navarre. And so they go up to the royal court in Paris. Now they get there long before the wedding. I mean, I'm sure wedding planning back then is not as different as it is today, you know. And so they're planning this huge wedding of these two royal people. Now, Jeanne came home one day feeling very sick. And she herself, the Queen of Navarre, she herself was still quite young, like not expected to die. She came home very sick and then just died in Paris. It is speculated still to this day that Catherine de Medici, Queen Catherine, had sent Jeanne some gloves for the wedding that were laced in poison to kill her. Now, a lot of people say, no, she just got sick and died. I don't think so. I believe there's probably some truth to this. Because of what's going to, there's a bigger plan of attack here that's coming. We're getting to the St. Bartholomew's Day massacre. So we had to get Jeanne out of the way. We've got the House of Guise too, which is there. One day I'm going to do a deep dive into the House of Guise because you talk about corrupt. They are just awful. They're kind of in support of the Vatican as well with Catherine. And so they're kind of involved in this. But anyway, so hold on, let's see. So while Henry is planning for the grand wedding, this is a grand wedding. There's a civil war going on, the wars of religion. His mom dies, so he immediately becomes the king of Navarre. So all this is going on at the same time. All of that at the same time. So tensions were very, very, very high. Now, a lot of the prominent Huguenots in France were under the impression that during this wedding, there was going to be a ceasefire for the wedding. And so they all traveled up to Paris to see this wedding. So on August 18th, 1572, the cousins were married in Notre Dame Cathedral, the same cathedral that burned down a few years ago, right? At this point, the princess wasn't just the daughter of a king. So Margaret wasn't just the daughter of Henry II, who was a king, but she was also the sister of one. So we've got these factions of the same family. And I just want to reiterate that both of these kids, basically, both of these cousins are, if we're playing chess, like they're the really important pieces in the way that they're being maneuvered, right? Okay, she is Catholic, he is Protestant. Even though he was baptized Catholic, he is siding with the Protestants. So this is kind of scandalous in itself, right? Kind of a Romeo and Juliet situation without them actually loving each other. But again, I'm going to reiterate again, no one ever thought that Henry of Navarre would ever become the king of France because she's got 4 sons. So this is just a little ploy, a chess piece from Catherine, who is in alliance with the Satanic Catholic Church, to take down all the prominent Huguenots. You guys see where I'm going with this? Okay. So on the 24th, so a few days after the ceremony, we had the beginnings of the Saint Bartholomew's massacre, and this began in Paris. This was a planned assassination of all the Huguenots who came to Henry's wedding. This is truly believed, and this is not speculation. A lot of historians absolutely are certain that Catherine was behind this, that she was the masterhead behind this with the House of Guise. And they had to if they got rid of Jean, the Queen of Navarre, who was very loved by the people, if they got rid of her, that was less of an obstacle to do this massacre. It happened on the eve of Saint Bartholomew's feast day. So this was like, as people say, this was an extreme terrorist attack, basically, in this time. So at this point, Paris had a wall around it. A lot of cities had it this way. There were walls around. So they closed off all of the walls, the gates to the city, so none of the Huguenots can get out. I think I sent you a couple of pictures, Morné, of kind of some famous pictures or famous paintings of this massacre. There's Catherine walking out over all the dead bodies in the black, just kind of sick. At this point, so Henry is the king of Navarre. He's now taken as a prisoner of war in Paris. So he's the king there. Yeah, you guys, they had nowhere to run, these Huguenots. He's in Paris. He's seeing he's just lost his mother, whom he was extremely close to. One thing interesting, I'll back up a little bit. One thing interesting about Henry IV of Navarre is that he was raised very different than his cousins of Valois. Henry of Navarre, it was very important to his grandfather, his mother, on this side, the Navarre side, his father's, whatever, to allow Henry to be raised as a normal child. So Henry, as a small child, went to school with all the other little boys or whatever he played outside with them. He played with the grocer's daughters. He played with the peasants. And then he was only taken away for a couple hours a day just to have some continuing education. So Henry is living he's lived a very different childhood than the Valois children. And so you can understand that his loyalties are going to naturally be inclined to the common man, because that's who he grew up with. That's who he played with as a child. And that was important to in Navarre, to his royal line, for him to have all the royal children to not be treated any different. Only for 2 hours a day were they taken and taught like more political stuff because of the responsibility they would carry as adults. And so I wanted us to really put ourselves in Henry's position. Again, he's just lost his mother. He's now in this crazy marriage to his cousin, this political marriage. He knows his aunt. He probably knows a lot more about his Aunt Catherine, the queen, that we even know about her evil deeds. He's watching all his comrades, his friends, his people slaughtered. He can't do anything. He's now a prisoner of war. He was held captive in court from 1572 until 1576. And Margaret was the one that saved his life, because she got him to agree. It was kind of like this, just say you're Catholic. Just say you're Catholic. Just tell them that you changed your mind and you're Catholic. You don't have to really be Catholic. You don't have to really be it. But just save yourself. And so that's basically what happened. All right. So time goes on. And I'm going to skip through a lot of history here, you guys, because it's not relevant to the story of Henry, but we have a lot of other stuff happening between 1776, and when he becomes king, or excuse me, 1576, and when he becomes king of France in 1589. If you're into military history, I would suggest researching, but again, it's not relevant to the story. But basically, there was lots of different factions of war going on. He goes back to Navarre with Margaret. Margaret gets cut off from her mother because now Margaret starts making claims that her mother is a Satanist, which, hello, LOL, we know this is true. Margaret and Henry never had kids because I don't even think they ever really had sex. I think they were two human beings. My perspective are two human beings that were born with souls in a family that had no souls. And so I think that they really they had each other. They ended up divorcing. He married another person that ended up becoming the mother of the Bourbon line. But he always supported Margaret and made sure she was okay. So all these wars are happening. Catherine's sons are just dying one after the other. It's kind of funny and karmic in a weird, sadistic way because Catherine's just done so much to so many people that it's kind of, the karma is interesting here. So anyway, he ends up becoming king of France because there's no other heir at this point. It's him now in 1589. Now, even though he got himself out of captivity by saying he was a Catholic, he still would, after he got out, was very openly supporting of the Huguenots. So we have an issue now because now the King of France, which is what he is now, King Henry IV, is a known Huguenot. Even though he's been baptized Catholic, claimed to be Catholic, there's still an issue because he's supporting the Huguenots. So he was not crowned king. He wasn't coronated, even though he was king, until 1593 because they had to force him to actually publicly become Catholic, like openly, in order to take the crown. But Henry's smart. I think he got a lot of his mother's political savvy. And in Margaret, who said, just say you are, just do it, and then whatever. Because after he became a Catholic and was coronated, he created all these treaties that granted religious freedoms to Huguenots. One particularly being the Edict of Nantes. Now, this is big. This is big to me because my German line, so this affected a lot of the areas around because my German line, I have a lot of German in me as well, were from northern Germany, close to France. And I know the Stroms, the Wunstroms as they were, and they left Germany when the Edict of Nantes was revoked with the Sun King, Louis XIV, which is one of Henry's grandchildren. Right. So, and that's when it was a killing spree on Protestants again, and they were Protestants. So they left Germany and came to America at that point. So the Edict of Nantes was really important. And so this gave, again, a lot of support to Protestantism. Basically, it's an edict that says, be a fucking human being and stop killing each other. Like, if people want to be Protestants, they can be Protestants. So this is why he got the reputation of being called a good King Henry. However, the Catholic factions hated him for this. They hated the fact that he had made it basically a felony to assault Protestants. And there's a lot to this. I've covered a lot of these different revolts and stuff on my channel because it's interesting. I think France had it the worst.
Sorry to interrupt you here, but I sit as you're speaking, and it just brings to mind again how religion has been used to divide and conquer and used to get humanity to slaughter each other, for us to slaughter our brothers and sisters, right? I mean, it's been since the beginning of time, since the division of pretty much religion, when they brought religion in, right? So they've used that to absolutely annihilate us human species. It's so disgusting. They've literally turned us against each other because we think differently. And it's still like that today. Yeah. If we just look at the Christians, who will then condemn any other religion or belief or faith, right? It's that and only that. And I find that very interesting because when you look at the Eastern teachings, for example, the Eastern teachings are so different, you know. It's about you transcending all the crap, right? And you have the ability to raise your frequency or your consciousness. And that's really what it's about. In my opinion, that's kind of superior, as opposed to you have to do this and and how many women, and especially women, because it was majority women, and of course there were men too, were burnt as witches in the name of the Bible, right?
Yeah.
Wow.
And that's why I wanted to bring up in the beginning the political, so people start to because they call us witches. I mean, listen, there are people out there that would gladly see the three of us burning at stakes right now. They're still doing this, and that's why I wanted to bring that beginning piece in. That this has nothing to do with they're using your salvation. They're using God as a weapon to trigger the consciousness of the common man. Meanwhile, they're doing it for military power. It's got nothing to do with God. Listen, Catherine Day de Medici and I do not worship the same God. That is for damn sure. Yeah. And that is why I often kind of, because we talked about, especially with Mr. Fox, like souled people versus organic portals. And I look at Henry's actions and the fact that Henry IV has no claims. There's never been anything historically pointing to him that's strange, like eating babies or, and I really look at him and his first wife, Margaret, his cousin. I think these look like souled people to me because he really, they were trying to survive in this crazy family. And Margaret was the one saying, just play the game and then go and do what's right. And yes, of course, one of the first thing he did, he was like, just let people be. It's almost like he knew that he obviously knew there was military reasons as to why this was happening. He obviously knows, you know your family. He knows there's weird shit in his family. And he feels, he feels that empathy for these, that's empathetic to actually feel for these people who just want to be left alone. And so we look at that and think what a great thing that is. But of course, the Catholic factions, and I want to say, I'm sure that there were a lot of Catholic French people at this time that did not want to go hunt Protestants. I'm sure of that. I'm sure. I'm talking about the powers that be, the military might, right? Now don't get to go and kill Protestants. Like, basically, and they were mad about that. Now they're mad that they can't go hunt Protestants, right? And so for all intents and purposes, for the roughly 20 or so years that he was on the throne, he was a very good king. Even though I don't believe in kings, I don't believe in that, but in the situation,
I do know. I think as long as we've been around, we've had leaders, governments, and things. I mean, even if you look at Egypt, as much as what they was crazy, there were always very good pharaohs as well and queens, right?
Yeah.
Every now and again, you're going to find something really good. So I think leaders are necessary. But
bloodline, but being given power just because you're born into a family, that's but because again, his mother was obviously there and he was raised with the people, and so he was probably out of all of them the most qualified for the job because he really was given it didn't seem like he was spoiled in any way, like where the Valois kids maybe were. He went to war, he fought alongside his men. I really have, until I'm proven otherwise. And we know that his descendants, he's going to have some really crazy descendants like Louis XIV, some really, and we know the Bourbons today are not the greatest of people. I would bet money that they're in the club, but for him specifically, this is why I say we can't judge people by their last name. We have to judge them by their actual character and integrity, because it seems like Henry IV really was just trying to do what's best for everybody and really seemed to be very fair. But on May 27th, he was executed. Oh, no, sorry. That's his assassin. Sorry, not May. The 14th of May, 1610, he was assassinated. He was in a carriage. I might have sent a picture, Morné. They've done sketches of this. He was in a carriage. He was going to somebody's house, and a young guy named Francois Ravelic, I want to say is how you say his name, killed him, assassinated him. He was a Catholic. I would say in today's language, he was probably MK Ultra, mind control, to go and take him out. Because obviously, in my opinion, Henri of Navarre, the Henry IV of France, was probably a threat to the controllers. because he did everything he could to stop them from hurting other people. And so Henri died by assassination in 1610. On the 27th of May, Francois, which I feel like, again, in my speculation, he was probably brainwashed, mind controlled to do this, but he was then executed in a very brutal way. Four horses pulled him apart. All right.
So, what? 4 horses pulled him? What are you talking about?
They tie him up. So this is my mind has gone blank again. The word, there's homicide, there's inficide. And
yes, I know.
Yeah.
There's a word for that. Yeah, I can't remember. But
genocide or something, when you kill, basically when you assassinate a royal family member, your level of execution is a lot higher, the torture is higher. And so that's why he was pulled apart by 4 horses. Disgusting. And I actually feel bad for him because I really do. Looking at it from today's eyes, I feel like he was controlled and conditioned to do that as a throwaway human, knowing that they were going to kill him afterwards, right? Just to take Henri out. We just got to take on, because he's Henry of Navarre.
Right, Ellie, thank you. Quartering, yes.
Yeah, quartering. Yeah, so it's disgusting. So how did his head go missing? So we got to go through a bit of a timeline here about how his head went missing. So after his death, Henri was buried at Saint Denis Basilica. I hope I'm saying that right. Again, French is not my strong suit. Right outside of Paris. And this is a place where a lot of royal family members are buried. So he was put into this burial with all his cousins, all his kind, and all was well. He was buried. It was great. They do like mummify them and embalm them, the royal families, before they bury him. So that's how his head lasted. But he was buried. All's well. Henri IV is buried. It's all fine until 1793. So we're talking almost 200 years later. Guess what happens? The French Revolution happens. So this is when Henri IV's great grandson got beheaded, and his wife, Marie Antoinette, got beheaded, right? So this is, and I am telling you guys, no one throws a revolution like the French. They can throw a revolution. If I were a French person in politics right now in France, I would be terrified, right? So, because it won't take much to pull that old guillotine right back out again. So when the French Revolution started, they decided, the people of Paris decided, I don't know who decided this, I think this is a terrible idea, but they decided to go into the graveyard and dig up all of the royal bodies and decimate them, including Henri IV's, which isn't fair. I kind of laughed because Catherine de Medici was in that mix as well. So I was like, tee-hee-hee-hee, because she got it as well. But I mean, Henri IV, I guess at that time, it was just whatever. You're just pulling. Anyway, eventually the bodies were all put back together and reburied. Until 1817, they decided, for whatever reason, to exhume Henry's body. And when they reopened it, the head was missing.
Big surprise. Woo!
Can you imagine? Like, I think it would be horrifying to exhume a body anyway. Like, I think it'd be traumatizing to see like the decay, even with an embalmed body, like it's still gonna decay. And then you open it and the smell. I mean, let's talk about the French Revolutionists who dug those bodies up. Did they not like get grossed out by the intense smell that was coming from these dead bodies? It doesn't matter.
Were they not like had stuff?
Oh, they were embalmed and they had their royal garb on, but it's still going to cost. I mean, you look at like, what is it? Either Stalin or Lenin. One of them's embalmed in Russia still, and they still have him on display. And someone's saying it's not even his body anymore because they've had to go touch it up so many times. It's not even, his DNA is gone at this point. So, I mean, like listen, no matter how rich or poor you are, when we die, we all stink. Like, it's horrific. No one's going to die and smell pretty. Let's just put it that way. I don't care if you're Henri or Catherine de Medici or Biden or Madonna. When we die, we're all going to stink. The body is just going to start to decay and stink, right? So they open the head. So 1870, they're like, we got a problem. Where is Henri IV's head? Like, his body's all put back together from being beaten up by the French Revolutionists, but the head's gone. Where's the head? Well, 1919, about 100 years later, it is said that a photographer named Joseph Emile Bourdet bought it at an auction for 3 francs. So, if I go to an auction and see a head, I'm going to have some questions. I'm going to have some questions.
I'll for 3 francs.
3 francs. That's what it's come to. And he knew it was the head of Henry IV. He tried to turn it over to the Louvre before his death in 1946, but the Louvre rejected it. The Louvre was like, you can keep your weird head. Like, keep that. I don't know what game you're playing, but, I mean,
oh my gosh.
Horrifying is that? So,
1992.
I mean, look at that. So in 2008, the head resurfaces, and it was found in the attic of a house in Western France that belonged to a man named Ballinger. He claimed that he bought it in an auction in 1953. Like, is this something they do in France? Like, let us know, guys. Do French people just go to auctions looking for heads? Like, this is 2 people.
But it's so insane that all their heads and their bodies disappear. I mean, who? Yeah.
So next week, I think the head next week actually might have ended up at a frat party at one house at one point, but we'll talk about that next week. But like, seriously, if you're from France, is this just something you got? Do you guys go to auctions and buy heads? Like, how is this happening twice in 1 century? Where it's like, yeah, I think I'll buy that head. That looks interesting.
Yeah, I'll just take that.
And then stick
I like Henry IV's head. It'll look good on my mantelpiece, like next to the head of Buddha.
Exactly, like my fake head, like my glass Buddha here. Like, and I'm a superstitious person. Like, I'm from the deep South, y'all. We're eccentric. I absolutely believe in ghosts. I don't want any dead party pots in my house because I don't want to invite any spirits into my house that I don't, that's just weird. That's just very weird. So anyway, they found the head in 2008. So
as recently as that. That was like a long time.
The head's been like going through. Henry IV went on a tour of all the flea markets of
yes.
No rest of the flea markets. Yeah.
I mean, that head. We don't know what happened to Alexander the Great's body. We don't know where Matahari's head is, but Henry's head's been traveling around France for a couple hundred years now. And now it's just hanging out in an attic. So the good thing, though, is in 2008, we have DNA testing. So scientists were a little bit more willing from the people that found the head. I guess it was their grandchildren. Like, we don't know what our grandfather was up to, but here's a head. We're going to turn it into you guys to DNA test it because they did believe, they knew that his head was missing. They knew there were rumors of this head floating around that belonged to Henry VIII. So the interesting thing is that as of recently, from my research, they've been trying to get the Bourbons of Spain, some of his descendants or extended family, to submit DNA. And it seems they won't do it. But, however, they have a handkerchief from the execution. Was it Louis XV and Marie Antoinette, his great whatever grandson, Louis XV, that got, or 16th, that got, I can't remember the number now, but got executed. So they have a handkerchief that wiped up some of his blood. So they took the blood from the handkerchief that supposedly, again, was the blood of one of his descendants and compared it to the DNA of the head, and they got a match. They also were able to computer generate how they can take, like, if they took my skull, they can look at the way, like, skulls all look the same to me, but if they could computer generate the skull, and they could see how the bone structure matched the bone structure of what they know of Henry IV. They also were able to look at some of nicks. There's some nicks on the skull from
Cecilia. I'm just looking at Cecilia's comment. Okay.
Well, let me see.
I'm French. No, we do not.
I believe you, Cecilia. This must be just a habit of the weirdos of the world. Like, long story short, guys, if you go to a flea market and you see a head, actually, you know what? Buy it, take it home, because we don't want that.
You never know. 3 francs. You can get it for 3 francs. It might be Henry's head.
and then hide it from the controller so they can't do their magic or whatever it is they're doing. I mean, obviously they didn't keep it up with Henry's head because I think they took it for a reason and then it disappeared and they were probably like, oops, like where'd it go? I'm so glad that French people are. I have a lot of French in me as well, just like Shanti. And like, I'm so glad my ancestors weren't out there just buying body parts. Like that's like
well, we can't be sure about that. I mean, unless we go do a deep dive into our family tree, right?
Were they buying body parts? Like this is weird. I say that. I know we've all got like Freemasons in our family. I've got it on both sides. And who knows? Maybe my ancestors were buying. I don't know.
I know. I don't have any known Freemasons. I suppose I better go check.
Yeah, I found.
I better go check.
I did. I thought there was one in my family, and then I found more, and I was like, oh, they're everywhere. So, that's fun. So, not my idea of a peaceful Sunday afternoon to go to the auction and start buying body parts though. So, I do understand that we can get into some other missing bodies that have to do with cadavers for medical school. There are stories about that, but that's for now. At least that's for a purpose. At least they're using the body for medical purposes, even if they stole them. But, anyway, so we do know with the blood from Louis the 16th or 15th that it is Henry IV. They would still like to test it against the descendants today of the Bourbons, just to double check, just to really have solid that this is the skull that belongs to Henry IV. But again, y'all, I looked into some of the Spanish. They asked some of the Spanish Bourbons. I looked into there's some shady characters, like for real. And his descendants, there's some shady characters. So I would speculate that there is a reason why they won't hand over their DNA. I don't know what that reason is. I don't know if it has anything to actually do with verifying if that's the skull of their great whatever grandpa. It might be something else. So they don't want their DNA out. They don't want people looking into their. I don't know. It could be many reasons. But yeah, guys, that's good King Henry IV's head. Bless his heart. Wow. In the South.
Bless his head. Bless that man's head.
Somebody else has got his heart. His heart might be in a freaking vase, like a mason jar somewhere.
Let's hope that the head hasn't traveled there, the heart hasn't traveled there.
I mean, we talked about Rasputin's penis last week. It's still in a jar somewhere, which we can get to Rasputin. I have a few other people I want to cover first, but maybe we can save Rasputin for the grand finale because.
Yeah, I'd love to do Rasputin. Actually, I would love to look into Rasputin.
Let's do him
because he was
grand
quite
finale.
a character.
He was talking about some sex magic. That guy was doing some weird shit. Next week, we're going to do an English person. I won't say who yet. And then I want to do an old movie star, shall we say, kind of like along the lines of Mata Hari. And then let's look at Rasputin as the grand finale because he's like the Mac daddy. That's kind of embarrassing. Like I know Rasputin did have children, but if your great whatever grandpa's wiener was on display.
You might have some issues.
I mean, talk about family jewels being on display, right? Like,
we're not talking the crowd either.
No,
we're talking the head.
Therapy. Like to look at that, be like, that ball sack is why I'm here.
The head. The different head.
Different dates. You just did it.
There are just
some head.
Like, so.
Oh my goodness. Okay, you obviously wasn't thinking with a head. No. He was thinking with a head.
I mean, I would be quite. So picture this, guys. Put yourself in the scene. You're an 8-year-old child. You're on a field trip with school at a museum. And all of a sudden, they present Rasputin's wiener. And everybody knows that you're famously a descendant of Rasputin. Could you imagine the mockery and the names that as an 8-year-old, it would be mortifying. Like I would be mortified. So I that is definitely the most interesting of body parts that they have severed from the said human and kept as a souvenir.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow. Crazy.
Humans are so fascinating.
Yes. Yes, Cecilia 16th. I was pretty sure it was the 16th, but I did Louis the 16th, but I didn't want to I my mind kind of got a little fuzzy there. So and they say, guys, I mean, there is a conspiracy. I don't know if it's true or not. It might be junk conspiracy that Marie Antoinette and Louis the 16th, one of their children who did survive, that they're the Paysor family now, which apparently is at the top of the triangle. So yes, I mean, French food is great, Cecilia. I love French food. It's amazing. So
I ain't eating no frogs, that's for sure. I ain't eating no frogs.
No, but I love. So I mean, I spent a lot of time in Paris when I was 17. Looking back now, I cannot believe my parents just like sent me there at 17. But I loved it because during the day I got to go. I was with it was for school. I got to go and eat crepes for lunch because nobody was watching.
Yeah, it's lovely. But that's wonderful about being adult. You know, you can absolutely have chocolate cake for breakfast and no one polices you.
Yeah.
So that's the cool thing about life. You get to do what the heck you want until you realize that chocolate cake ain't that good for you, right? And Mama had something about us not having, you know.
I mean, I thought it was so cool at 17 that I could just basically buy a chocolate pancake on it from a street vendor in Paris, and I could just eat it for lunch and then go about my day, you know? And so
another one. and another one.
And I was really, I mean, looking back at that, I mean, I look at my parents, I'm like, I cannot believe when I was 17, they sent me to Paris with friends, with the school. And I gallivanted around Paris by myself. I was this skinny 17-year-old blonde hair, blue-eyed girl. My French was better than it is now, but I still didn't mean I spoke it well. I could have been picked up so quickly. But
just shows you, right? I mean, gosh, when you look back, honestly, and I mean, how, you know, it kind of makes me wonder, you know, when you sit and think about in life, how many close shaves we've had, right?
Yeah.
Exactly.
How many dodgy creatures of the night have been hanging around and maybe just missed us, or we don't even know, right? Wow.
They're probably watching me from afar, like, she's too wild. She's too hyper. No.
We'll have a tough time with this one. She won't comply.
She's going to ask too many questions. She doesn't sit down to eat. She runs and eats her crepe at the same time. Like, we're not, no, I don't think so. I think we need to, like, go to the next one. So.
Funny.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, well, that was very fascinating and entertaining. And we're talking about heads getting lost all over the show. These ones and those ones and family jewels and crowns and
So you think your family's crazy? Have you heard about this family over here?
Yeah, no, I think mine's quite mild actually. So we're all good, yeah, right? We just live in the outback of Africa. We're all good.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm like, listen, I'm so grateful my parents were as normal as they were. Even with the issues we all have with our parents, I'm just grateful they weren't saving body parts. So, so I mean,
cool.
I don't think my mother saved our teeth. You know, some people save their kids' teeth from the tooth fairy. I don't think my mother saved ours. She just threw them away. So, anyway, well, that was fun, guys. I can't wait for next week. Next week is even more juicy.
Exactly. Well, let's do it. I think we should do a deep dive on the tooth fairy. What was the obsession with teeth? But you know that the teeth in your mouth, right? They are all they're crystals called apatite.
Oh, wow.
All your teeth are apatite. And we're going to be doing a deep dive with Caleb on crystals. So tune in. Tune in. Very, very interesting. Very, very interesting. So
Awesome.
that makes, I'm wondering about the tooth fairy. Like,
it is kind of creepy, isn't it?
Fairy? Hey?
It's kind of creepy, isn't it?
Yeah, seriously creepy. Seriously creepy.
My mother, when my mother was one of 4 girls, she was the second oldest, and my Aunt Mary Jo was the third. My mother and my Aunt Mary Jo were really close in age. And when my mother found out that the tooth fairy wasn't real, that it was her mother, their mother, she went, the first thing she did was tell my Aunt Mary Jo as a little girl, like, Mom's the tooth fairy. So for years, my Aunt Mary Jo thought that our grandmother was literally the tooth fairy, that she was literally flying around.
Cute.
and giving everyone $5 for their
You didn't
tube.
recognize that it was like,
Yeah, exactly.
yeah,
Cute.
yeah.
Yeah. Okie dokie, y'all. Well, thank you so much for joining. It's so fun to have these conversations. And as we say, next week, we're going to be doing something juicy. So tune in. And I shall see you guys not tomorrow. Jesse Wednesday, Brice Wednesday, Caleb Thursday. I can't remember what the schedule is. Morné, have you put it up yet? The schedule for this week.
It's you're correct. And then Sunday again, Caleb again.
Yeah, I'm still actually planning. I've got some cool new guests on the table with Aris. So you guys, I don't want to say anything yet because I'm just about to zap them in. And there's some cool new things we're doing on the show. So stay tuned. I've got some ideas. And yeah, look forward to seeing you then. I won't see you tomorrow, I don't think. But Wednesday with Jesse and then Brice again. Yeah. Cool, everybody. God bless you all. Mwah. Take good care of you. And we look forward to seeing you soon again. Have a beautiful week. Ciao, ciao.